Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here with RC Driver, and I can see some more track time in my future. Check out what I have here to show you guys today. This is the Team Losi Racing 8XE. This is a really cool buggy because it is completely different than its predecessors. Well, shouldn't say completely. There are a couple of parts that are the same, but Team Losi just went to town and rebuilt this buggy from the ground up. And from what I see here, there's some really exciting changes that happen and stuff that I really like. I mean, my last TLR vehicle was the 8E 3.0, and it is just totally different from it. And like I said, what I see here is just really exciting, and there's just lots of stuff to go over here. So let me start off by talking about the exterior features, kind of the show off stuff here, and that is the body. So we've got a wider cab forward style body now, and it is more aerodynamic in my opinion. This new boxy cab type of thing, it looks cool on some vehicles, but I really like the style and look of this particular body on this. It actually works on the Nitro vehicle as well, but it's just really got this sleek cab forward look to it, and I like the wide stance now that they're using with this. Sent this over to Larry at Custom RC Graphics. Just wanted to give him a quick shout out for dropping my racing scheme on here, and again, just a very cool looking body on this. All right, the other big feature to talk about on the outside of the buggy is the wing in the rear. It is a bit different from previous wings used on the Losi 8. It still has the wicker bill up top, and actually they give you a smaller lipped wicker bill as well for less drag there, so that is an option included in the kit. But they've got new side plates on here, and it actually still retains the same center mounting points. So if you did want to use an older wing on here, you can do that. And what I like here, they did give aluminum wing buttons to secure the wing down. That's a nice little option that's included with the kit. All right, that pretty much wraps up the exterior stuff that I want to talk about. Now it's time to move on to really all the performance stuff, and this thing is really loaded up, so I hope I get everything down and let you guys know what's going on with this kit. So let's start off up front with the shocks, and these are optimized shocks for better performance, better bump handling. They have a bleeder cap on them. However, TLR does give you bladders in this optional bag kit, and so if you want to go and build with a bladder, you could do that. So the bleeder shocks, there is a 4mm shock shaft in there. They do have a 3.5mm option. It's a conversion kit, so that is available out there. On the bottom of the shock, the shock perch now screws to the lower ball stud, or to the lower ball end on there, so you won't lose any ball cups in a crash or anything like that. Really nice. And then the top shock stand is a quick change, so if you want to go and adjust your shock angle quickly, you could go and do that by removing the nut in the back, but just a really smooth feel out of these shocks. Overall, they've always gone together really well from the TLR camp, but really nice shock setup. New tower on the front to go along with the new geometry of the car here, basically. New front and rear shock tower on this. The hard anodized, thick aluminum, as you would expect. Now let's talk about the suspension arms and the suspension pivots actually. So we've got a narrower pivot set up in the front, wider arm, and the inner pivots are the machined aluminum pivots with inserts in there, so you have the tunability of changing out the inserts if you want to. But the arm itself is really nicely designed. They do have an insert in the top, and they do have a optional carbon fiber insert if you want to put that in there, stiffen it up. So nice, you have options, and TLR already has that available out there if you want to go swap those out. On the outside, we now have kind of a standard caster block, 17.5 degrees, with aluminum spindles on the outside. And what's pretty neat about that is this setup is even tunable as well. There are different inserts that you could put for the pivot, and you could raise and lower it depending on how you situate it inside the caster block there. So that's a pretty neat setup. The only thing is they use a kingpin screw in there that you have to Loctite in, and those always worry me, but I'm sure as long as you prep your car properly, it's not going to be a problem. The arm also bolts on separately onto the spindle. I'm sure TLR will have an optional setup if you want to go and change the steering geometry on that. But up top here we have new camber links. What I've read about the camber links is that they have longer plastic rod ends on there and a shorter turnbuckle piece, so there's less metal. So it's a lighter weight setup, and you have the plastic there, which is longer to make up for any durability loss. So that should work out. Always easy to adjust the setup on these buggies. Now let's move on to the sway bars. So new optimized sway bar setup. It's got centering collars here to keep everything nice and sturdy. Nice aluminum hardware on here. The pivot ball ends on it, and the collars are aluminum as well. And in the kit here, just like the other TLR kits, they do give you optional sway bars, so you go swap out sway bars front and rear on this. Okay, now into, let's talk about the drivetrain. Let's get into the drivetrain stuff. Might as well do that, right? So, new gear case on the front of this. It's been a long time since we've seen a new gear case up front, but what's really cool about this is you could go and easily access the front differential, and even in the rear. I'll get to that in a minute. But you pop off the top front, and your differential will come right out. So you need to make an oil swap in your differential or clean it for maintenance. Much easier to do now. There are new lightweight out drives on the front of this and in the rear as well, but the differential itself, the gears inside, those have been carried over from the old car, and those work great, so I could see why they carried them over. It is a metric setup, and that's something I should probably mention here, is the entire car now uses metric hardware, so no more 540 screws like we saw on the older kits, all metric throughout. So that's a nice welcome change in my opinion. But that really rounds it out for the differentials. Behind there's new oversized bearings for the bevel pinion, and even a spacer in there to help keep everything lined up properly. So nice welcome changes there as well. And then universal drive shafts, CV style universal drive shafts out to the wheels, 17mm hex, of course. That's the standard for A scale. And then sealed ball bearings throughout. So everything you would expect out of the the TLR camp, just high-end racing stuff here. All right, let's move right back to the steering on this. So the steering has been totally re-engineered here. We have a new style of servo saver set up with an elastomer in there versus a spring. And I'm going to keep referencing this little bag over here. Inside this bag is a standard spring if you do want to use that. But the acronym bar has been swapped out. It's a new setup with the 3 holes in there, so you can go and adjust your steering rod position if you want to. And just overall, nice compact, but looks like it's going to work really well set up for the steering. We've got a short link over here to the servo arm, and they do give you a plastic horn out of the box, and I know that there's already a aluminum option from TLR, so if you want to go swap that out for racing, I would go and do that right out of the gate. All right, so off the top of the steering brace here, the front brace is your body mount, and then we have a stiffener brace down to the chassis on there, and even a new stiffener brace in the rear of the vehicle as well. All right, in the center of this is a decomposable center diff mount, which means you pull the 4 screws out of the top and your diff just pops right out, and again, for easy maintenance. Now the big change here is they now have the motor mount separate. So before, the motor mount was a part of the differential mount, and what TLR found is some flex there would cause some binding or premature wear in the gearing and stuff like that. So they've separated the two, and that allows it to be decomposable in the center, so you can take it apart. And what it also means is that now that the motor is nice and secured to the chassis, helps a little with heat dissipation, and won't wear the gears down as you're jumping and stuff, and that flex could cause movement. So hopefully everything lasts longer. There's less bind, less drag. More power to the ground, basically. So the chassis on this is all new as well. It's a nice wider setup than normal, and the TLRs of the past, the narrow setup was pretty cool, and I thought it was the latest and greatest thing at the time. But these wider setups are just nice and nimble now, much easier to drive, in my opinion, more forgiving. So I'm excited to see how this works, because it's just got a great look to it, in theory, and I'm hoping that's going to work out well on the track. The battery tray, it's a simple battery tray setup. There's actually 3 Velcro straps that come with it. I'm just using 2 right now, but there is also a center strap that goes down the center basically, and we got the 2 on the front and back here. I'm I'm just using the 2. But the battery sits on the chassis. Basically, there are foam pads underneath to damp the battery to make sure it doesn't get shocked from landings. But a simple battery composite case, front and rear, to secure everything. There are some foam pads, so you can go space the battery out depending on the type of battery you have. We got our dirt guards on the side here, which keep debris out, and then a nice large radio box servo mount set up over here. So there's 4 screws that secure this assembly down, and it provides a nice sturdy mount for the servo, and in this radio box, tons of room in here, so you could put your receiver and your transponder if you want to, and of course bundle up your wires if necessary. I'm using a Spectrum 6390BL servo in here. Nice metal case servo from Spectrum. Should give this buggy plenty of steering. Now let me move over to the center drive shafts, because I missed that before. They are a universal drive shaft, and they do have a boot on them to keep the pin in there just in case something happens, but also mainly to keep debris out of the universal part of the drive shaft. The center differential, it does have lightweight outdrives on there. They are a bit different from the front and rear. That was pulled over basically from the older kits. Didn't need to be swapped out. But the spur gear on here is a steel spur gear. So some of the older kits, I believe, had the plastic composite gear. This is metal here for better durability. All right, now we can move on to the rear of the buggy, and lots of changes going on here as well. The rear differential case, actually, I do want to really point this out. It's easy access as well. You pull the screws out of the top of this case, and it's a split case, so it pulls apart in half. So the top half will actually come off with a shock tower and everything on there, so you get access to diff. And it's just a really cool setup the way that's done. I really like that. And just like the front, it does have the oversized bearings in here to support that bevel pinion, and then the differential, of course, oil filled. It's the carryover differential from the older kits. All right, new rear shock tower on the back, and new rear shocks, basically the same features as the front. The arms, again, just like the front, they have the inserts on the inside, nice wide arm, narrower pivot in the rear, and of course we've got the aluminum pivot blocks with the inserts for tunability. So these are really durable as you would expect. All right, now on the outside there are new rear hubs. Again, plenty of mounting positions in there. Seal ball bearings to support the CV style universal axles. There are of course spacers, so you could go and adjust the wheelbase on here. And what I like about the outside pin is it's double nutted on each side, so it makes it easier to do your wheelbase swap, and it makes it pretty much bulletproof. No eclipse to fall off, or no screw pins to back out or anything like that. Really nice setup there. Reverse threaded screw on the arm, so the shock screw doesn't back out, just like in the front. We've got the easy to change shock posts on the top. Oh, there's something I missed that I want to talk to you guys about. So we've got the dirt shields in the rear as well, and just properly positioned so it doesn't get the drive shaft dirty, and of course get the rear shock dirty as well. Now another option that you could do right out of the kit with this is you could put the rear shocks in the front. So yes, the rear is highly tunable. So there are actually parts in this bag here, yes, the bag I keep mentioning, that you go and use in order to put these shocks in the forward position. And what that does is it changes the way the buggy basically rotates in the corner, or you could have it in the rear for a bit more traction, the way the arm flexes. So I've got the shocks placed in the rear. I always like a bit more traction, so that's the route I chose to go with this. But it's very cool that you could go right out of the box and have that tuning option with the parts that are included with the kit. I really like how far TLR thought this thing out and just, gave you basically everything you need to drive this car on so many different types of tracks. Rear wing mount is composite plastic, as the old ones were, but as I mentioned, it does have the same stance to it as the older mounts do. The rear sway bar, of course, has been optimized, as I mentioned earlier, similar to what they did in the front. And I think that's really it. We've got droop screws in the arms, of course. The rear differential does have metal bearing supports in there to make sure nothing moves around, under power. The speed controller does have a mounting plate now. That's something I should really point out. So you could go and pull your speed controller off for maintenance by just removing a few screws. Much easier than in the past, where you had to pull the two-side tape off, redo everything. So that's a welcome addition there. And overall, it's just a nice, clean, easy layout. I like this new wide chassis style layout for the TLR vehicles. And I think they just went over the top. I'm a little bit of a TLR snob. I love their vehicles, and again, I think they just did an amazing job creating this thing. You may be wondering about the motor. I didn't talk about this before. What happens if you have a different size motor in there? There are actually rubber O-rings that they give you to basically space out the motor within these clamps here. So all the popular motor options out there should be able to fit within this car using the different O-rings to set that. But exciting stuff going on here. I'm kind of at the end of the racing season for this year, 2019. Lots of stuff going on. Had to build this up, but I'm ready to go hit the track with it now. Show you guys what this buggy could do. It's time to talk performance of the 8xe, and to test this vehicle out, I went up to RC Madness in Enfield, Connecticut, one of the premier tracks in the country. They've got a number of different style tracks for all types of racing, and of course they have an A-scale outdoor track, a nice dirt track where we tested this vehicle, and I gotta tell you guys, I was a little rusty out there. It's been a while since I've hit the dirt track with a vehicle, and I was a little all over the place in the beginning, and some of that was because of tires actually, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But overall, this was an awesome driving experience, and spoiler alert, I liked it a lot better than my last Losi electric buggy experience, the 3.0. This was just a much more pleasant driving experience overall. So let's start off with the steering on it, and I didn't really have the right tires. These were Proline Fugitives. The track is a large track with lots of jumps and varying corners and stuff like that, but there was a lot of loose dirt on the top of the surface, and underneath it was packed, and these are more of a swept, almost concrete-like surface type of tire, and typically I like using a blockade. That's probably what I should have brought with me. Didn't have it with me though, so I kind of just made do and got a feel for the buggy. So there was a bit of understeer with these tires on there, and I can't fault the buggy for that. I think the buggy actually steers pretty well. From what I could tell, it rotates well. It certainly does have plenty of physical steering throw, and for the off-power situations, I was able to get the buggy around the corners fairly tightly, but some of the larger sweeping corners that I really wanted to power this thing through, there was too much of a push for me, and again, I can't fault the car for that, and yes, I should have brought more tires with me, but I didn't, and I hope to get back there soon so I could play with this thing some more. But I made do with what I had, so I give you guys the review here, and I think this thing steers really well. I mean, I've seen reports of it steering really well, but the key is again having the right tires. A pro racer once told me it's all in the tires. You could have just a basic setup on here, throw on whatever you want. It's all about the tires. Now on to the handling. This is where I really wanted to talk to you about. I like the way this thing handles. It's a very nice, nimble setup, smooth, I think very easy to drive. I'm kind of basing it on my experience with the 3.0, which I actually really liked that, but it was a narrower buggy and a bit more, I don't know, maybe like twitchy on the edge where you really had to drive it a lot, where this thing, it's a lot smoother. You know, you're not so tense when you're driving it. It just handles really well through the bumps and stuff. If you do need to recover, it's much more smooth and nimble. And I think, you know, I would actually prefer that over being, you know, super fast and super twitchy, because you're constantly after driving it, where with this particular vehicle, it just handles super smooth through the bumps and over the jumps. In fact, the jumps are just fantastic with this thing. It just glides so nice and smooth over the jumps. The landings are ultra plus, you know, no checking up or you know, gathering it up after the jump. It just lands and it's planted. 4 tires on the ground and you go. You apply throttle, you're on your way. Where with the, you know, again, the older vehicle, you kind of had to watch your landing and be prepared to drive out of it. I like the new wider platform. I think it really helps, you know, make this a much more drivable car. Onto, you know, acceleration with it on the straightaway, it was fairly cleared off straightaway, so it accelerates really well, really fast, lays down the power really well when you punch it, and the same, you know, when braking, it's very manageable. So you know the power and drivability of this car is on point. I think that's what TLR was kind of going for, is just redesigning this car to be a very drivable car, and I think they nailed it. As far as durability, I didn't really crash it. I think that says something for the handling as well. Even though, you know, I was a little bit all over the place with some understeer, even bounced off a couple of pipes, I really didn't have to flip this thing over, and I did hit some pipes and nothing happened to it. You know, so it is a durable car. If anything, maybe I would put on the aluminum rear hubs, maybe the aluminum caster blocks, but right out of the box, I think you're just getting a great race buggy that anyone of any skill level could take this out and do well with it, you know, at a club race or at a large race or whatever. I mean, that's the TLR brand. They've got years and years of experience building a great modern car that you know, most people could drive, and that's what I've always loved about it. Every release of a vehicle is a great car to drive, and certainly capable in competition. So if you are looking to get into A-scale racing with you know, the 8xe, or you're already into racing, maybe looking to switch brands or something like that, I mean, it's TLR, guys. It's a great vehicle. It's got great support to it. You know, I used a Dakota Fens setup on here. I actually used a 2000 kV motor, which was a little bit too much for me, but still I was able to get around the track pretty fast and have a great time running it. And I think if I could get out for some racing, you know, this is going to be a great platform to just throw on the track and be able to, you know, compete with. All right, guys, thanks for watching the channel. Definitely hit that subscribe button and the notifications bell, because we actually have some more TLR stuff coming up very soon.